Hi there, I'm Mr. D, and welcome to Teacher Thoughts. Teaching is hard, to say the least, for several reasons. One category of those reasons are systematic, and a lot of those seem to be splashes from systematic issues in our society, and that's another topic for another day. The other category of reasons why it's hard to teach is more individual, and today I want to focus on one of those reasons. I don't intend to solve the problem by any means with this video, but I do hope to bring awareness to it, because I believe that when we shine light on some of these things like this, they kind of lose their power over us. So let's get into it. I want to start with a story. I have this student named, I'm gonna call him Marco, and I teach 8th grade special education math, and Marco is kind of a late bloomer. He's a super sweet kid, really funny, sense of humor, braces and glasses, and kind of heavy set, and a lot of the kids he gets like made fun of a little bit in school, unfortunately. But Marco's a sweet kid. He also tends to get really distracted in class. In math class particularly, because I think it's, a little bit tougher for him. He does have an IEP, but that's not really totally related to what I'm about to say. I noticed one week that Marco was more distracted than usual, and the thing that really brought it to my attention was when there's this one class period, and there was just a lot going on that day, and I didn't notice, but Marco didn't have a pencil for the first 20 minutes of class, and he never raised his hand, he never asked a friend for one. He just didn't have a pencil. And mind you, during those 20 minutes, we were taking notes, we were doing work, we were doing things with our pencils. So when I finally noticed what was going on, understandably, I was pretty upset, and I was just thinking to myself, like, how do you get this far in class without even asking a friend for a pencil? Something, like, what? But anyway, I took a deep breath, and I went over and knelt down next to Marco, and I said, hey, buddy, like, you seem really distracted this week, like, what's going on? And he ended up confessing in that conversation that his uncle had passed away, and that they were really close. And in that moment, it made me realize, like, okay, kids are having full emotional lives, full emotional reactions, and sometimes experiencing something as deep as grief, and coming to school and having reactions in class without knowing that they're having a reaction. It made me think about, like, some of the other trauma that many of my students have experienced, where they don't realize that they're experiencing trauma. They don't realize that they're showing up in class and acting out because of some other trauma that's going on, right? I kind of put a little note in my head, like, oh, this is something that, we should teach them. Like, we should teach them to notice, like, oh, you might be more distracted because of that grief. But the truth of it is, and this is a quote I'm stealing from a book called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. And he says, we cannot be a source of strength without nurturing our own strength. Because of course, when we're asking kids to do something really hard, like learn, the productive struggle is called the productive struggle because it is indeed a struggle. Of course there are going to be some behavior problems sometimes, and when it's excessive, obviously that's like another issue, and that's getting into, behavior intervention plans and things like this. But all of that aside, there are going to be behavior issues in class that we're dealing with because we're asking students to do something really hard that they didn't necessarily choose to do. Imagine if I asked you to do something that you didn't really want to do, but was judging your performance on it constantly. Like, it would be pretty hard. Like, you might complain a little bit, right? The point that I'm trying to make here is that if we are not healed ourselves, if we are having, similarly to Marco, like, reactions come up without noticing them as reactions while we're teaching, that is like a recipe to be a really unhappy teacher. Because maybe it's not us not bringing our pencil or something like that. Maybe it is, losing our temper in a moment that could have been a teachable moment. When we nurture our own strength, we are modeling how to be when we face a challenge. We are modeling how to push through difficult times. It doesn't mean that you always have to be in a good mood, and it doesn't mean that we have to see each and every child as perfect angels, because they're not. Us being able to be aware of how we're feeling and why we feel the way we feel in those moments, we can leverage that to teach our students. M. Scott Peck had one other quote that I'm gonna steal here because it was just very relevant to this idea, but he says, "Real love occurs in a context in which the feeling of love is lacking. When we act lovingly despite the fact that we don't feel loving." And I think the same is very true in teaching. So let us nurture our own strength and whatever that means. And honestly, for me, what it looks like is a lot of self-care, meditation and exercise, therapy, straight up. Not gonna lie, I think that we have to heal ourselves in order to be able to be there for our students. It actually made me think of, I was listening to the Teacher Class Off podcast with CJ Reynolds, and he actually said this quote. He said, "I couldn't have taught earlier, like in life, because I wasn't healed enough to be ready to have anything to do with a young person's future." And that really resonated with me because I came to teaching a bit later in life too, and it made me realize that we're all just people trying to do our best, everybody, our students included. So best of luck to you, and I hope that this was helpful in some way.